Guys, this is Stacey from Cosy Owl. If you're joining us for our live tonight, welcome. We're just going to be discussing through things that can make your startup a bit cheaper. So how you can spend less money to still get the same sort of results in your testing process. Just waiting now for Abbey from Makes Sense joining us. Hopefully she will be along shortly. But do let us know if you're just starting out, what it is that you like making or what it is you want to make. Any sort of advice you want on fragrances, do just let us know and we can is join. Hello, how are you?
Hello. I'm
good.
Good, thank you. I've had one of those days today where it's distracted me from candles, but it's kind of all I want to think about instead because it's been stressful for all the wrong reasons. So I'm quite glad I'm going to light a candle in a minute and chill out. Yeah. How are you doing?
Not
How's
too
everything
bad.
going at Cosy
So
Owl?
just been a bit busy at the minute, just trying to get stuff sorted. Of course, more documents and new documents. When don't we have that? So yeah, and just getting some stock in as well. We appreciate some of the fragrances have been out of stock for a little while, so it's all just getting that all prepped and sorted as well.
But I think this is a good time. I mean, I wonder what everyone else is doing at home. But I mean, I'm quite quiet at the moment in terms of orders, but I can see from lots of forums, a lot of people are exactly the same in summer. Well, and I feel a bit like I'm lying when I call it summer because I'm like looking out the window at the same time.
Awful, isn't it?
But it's so bad, and it makes me start thinking now about autumn and thinking I'm behind because I know you guys have sent out like emails about autumn and Christmas already and things like that, and I'm like, am I behind? But I'm not.
We have been getting a surprising number of orders for Christmas fragrances, so they're starting to filter through quite quickly now.
Yeah, everyone's ahead of the game compared to me by the sounds of it. But I think this is a really good time actually to talk about testing because people might want to be trying new scents for autumn and winter, and now's quite a good time to do that. I was hearing that you were sort of saying about different tips, first of all, in terms of ways to make it cheaper, which I think is really, really key. So I'd be really keen.
So sort of my top tip is, one thing you have to do when you're testing is you have to stay with the same jar or candle container, tin, whatever it may be, as the size that you want to sell. So, because that's the only way you're going to find out the right wick that you need. But my sort of tip is don't fill the tin or the jar completely. Make a half candle. That way then you can cut the wick in half as well and wick another container. So you're getting 2 candles out of the one wick if you just use a sustainer to connect to the top half that you've cut off. And you're also then using half the amount of wax, but you're still being able to test how wide that wick will burn to in your container to make sure it's the right size for the container. That's my sort of main tip.
Yeah. So you're not changing anything to do with the width at all, which is the most important part. Yeah, I think that's really that is such a good tip, and I think it's like under, you know, I hadn't heard of that before you mentioned it, so I think it's so good because if you're having 200 grams of wax, say, or like the 30 cls do 183, I think 186 grams, and then so if you're doing that every single time, it's a lot.
Especially if the wick doesn't work at all as well, because then that's almost an entire candle wasted, whereas at least if it's half a candle it's much better. That's quite good.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was experimenting way back with I think on a live potentially, but it was with the wooden wicks, and I actually had some wooden wicks that didn't ignite at all because I didn't double ply them. So that I was like, why? I was reading the instructions. I was like, why do we actually double wick these and dip them in wax and things like that? So I thought, oh, I'll just do it without that, see what the effect is. It just didn't light at all. And wooden wicks, like I really like as we're going into autumn as well, because they're really reliable. I find they're finally easier to wick jars with because they create a lot of heat. But that can also throw people off as well.
Yeah, definitely. I find that as well. But the good thing with the with the wooden wicks is that you get that lovely crackling effect as well, don't you? The sound as well as the scent. But quite a lot of people actually do like the smell of the wood burning as well. But the main reason you need to pre-wax them is because when you light them to start off with, it's got that wax already around the top of the wooden wick that fuels the flame to then carry on burning. Otherwise, it's just going to be burning wood with no fuel until it hits that the top of the candle where it can then fuel. But at that point, it's too late. There's not much wick left, so it can struggle and it can drown in the wax almost without pulling it up.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think a lot of the things around testing come back to if we sort of park the safety ones to the side for the moment, but the testing around like choosing your right wick, choosing the right wax, choosing the right fragrance or combination all come down to kind of troubleshooting as well. So it might be worth touching on a couple of things. I've dived into my bad examples again. I just keep these on standby for these purposes. This isn't actually too bad, and I was going to light this before, but then it would actually kind of miss a point. I've actually got like a sinkhole air bubble in there. So some of the testing obviously helps work out your combinations, but also gives you a chance to kind of let the candles sit and cure and see if they have errors like this going on. You wouldn't have noticed this on the top because it was actually
part way down,
was, like, hidden inside it. And you can also see it's tunneled a bit as well, which is another thing in the testing process. So have you got any tips for like
that's not too bad of a tunnel, because whilst when you first light it you're going to have that slight tunnel, when you light it a second time and the flame then burns further down, you'll find the residual heat coming from the side of the flame will actually melt that, because it's such a small amount of tunnel to the side that wouldn't get wasted. It would just melt slightly further down and then fill up the melt pool, if you like, further down the candle. So I wouldn't actually say that kind of level of tunneling is too much of an issue, because when
it'd be when it's
when you've got more like wax wasted to the side, it's definitely an issue. But also sort of with tunneling, one thing it's all down to the wick pretty much. Predominantly, it's very rarely anything else at fault. It's the wick. So you just need to wick up a size, or maybe even more, depending on what size the container is to what wick you're using, and also what wax you're using as well. That is a factor in it too.
I think the best place to start with, if you're choosing a wick, so if you're at that stage, but do let us know in the comments if, even after this video ends, when you're watching a playback, if there's any, if you're at a specific kind of point, or you're kind of going around in circles testing things, because I've lent on the Cosy Owl team before when I'm like working out how to wick a certain combination and thinking, oh, why is this not working? I'm doing everything I think I am in terms of best practice. So they're really useful if you've got a specific scenario. As a general rule of thumb, I just realised I've taken pictures of this with sand and it's got sand everywhere. General rule of thumb, so look at the Cosy Owl guides, because whenever I'm starting with a new container, this is the 30cl matte white. I can't remember.
Yeah, the 30cl Karen,
they're a really good starting place. And then if you're having tunneling, so where the wax isn't melting all the way across on that initial burn, or initial couple of burns, as we were just talking about, then you need to wick up. And if it's going too quickly, you have to wick down. That's the general rule. So when I say wick up, wick down, they go up in sizes. So you can see that on the guide, basically. So, because I didn't understand what wicking up meant.
Sorry, infuriatingly though, sometimes you can find that if you wick up, it burns too quickly, or the flame is too large, and if you wick down you get tunneling like that. So then in those instances it might be worth trying a different wick. So you've got TCR, you've got Eco, you've got LX, and there are a number of other sort of wick brands, if you like, wick styles out there. So you may just have to, the fragrance may not agree with that particular wick. Sometimes in the wax, your combination is just all off. So you may have to change to a different wick.
Yeah. Some brands, like some high street brands, really like a deep melt pool because it releases lots of fragrance into the air. I think the downside of that is obviously you're burning through your candle very, very quickly.
And it's
so
also quite dangerous.
It's cost effective for customers.
Yeah, it's also very quite dangerous because if that gets knocked over, that's a lot of molten wax then that's going to be pouring over onto something and hopefully not someone.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing leading on when we're talking about wicks and wicking up is that we could have like mushrooming and excess of carbon in the wick as well from having the wrong wick size. So generally we'd keep our wicks every time we burn our candles at 5mm or less, and that would keep the wick the flame smaller as well. And there are different tests you can do on the flame heights. I find this one quite a difficult one because it's quite hard to actually get quite close to it and judge it in terms of the size. But generally, you just need a small wick, a small flame.
Your ideal flame is sort of a centimetre to a centimetre and a half. Ideally, that's what you're looking at. And your melt pool, ideally, you want that to be no deeper than a centimetre at absolute maximum, really. Anything deeper, you are just, like you say, burning through it so quickly that your sort of average burn time to your candle is going to be a lot lower than what your customer may actually want as well, so they may not come back, sort of thing. Or it's everything that comes into testing.
Absolutely. And just touching on average burn time, so that might be something that people would use at home if you're looking to sell your candles and say you've got an average burn time of X amount of hours, and that can sometimes be a draw for customers. So the way to work that out alongside your testing is to light your candle, have it burning for 4 hours, and then stop and see how much of the candle weight goes from where you've initially weighed it.
That's a good way of working that out. I'd never have thought of that before. That's really handy.
Yeah, so you can look at it each hour, see how much is going down, and then you do some maths and work out therefore how quickly the whole thing would decrease, basically. So don't leave a candle burning for more than 4 hours at a time. I tend to do a max of 2 hours, and even though these glasses from Cosy Owl, like you guys do heat testing, you only buy from suppliers where it's been heat tested, stress tested, but there's always a chance that you can have a faulty item from anywhere, and something's not quite right. Anyway, so I would say as much guidance you can give your customers as possible is always going to be a benefit as well. When you're discussing things like if you use soy wax, the texture of soy wax and how soy wax kind of works, if you can also inform customers at the same time of how they should use their candles and not have them near open flames, near children and pets, it's just a good reminder and protects you as well.
One thing, definitely. One thing I'd say as well that some people, it might be an oversight sort of thing, is when you're giving out sort of samples of your candles to friends and family to test and let you know what they think of the scent pro, quite often your friends and your family are the sort of people that are going to sugarcoat it. So they might actually not give you honest feedback unless you sort of everyone's got that one brutal friend, haven't they, that will so maybe give it to them. But outside of that, I'd say the best thing to do is perhaps if you've already got a clientele, so you've already sort of established and are selling to people, gift one to them or do it at a cheaper price sort of thing and just ask for their honest feedback. Customers are more likely going to be honest with you about the product as opposed to your family and friends might be.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's that element, isn't there? And I think we talked about it in previous lives when you're marketing. There's an element of you in this brand, but it's not personal because this is a product.
Exactly.
And we still want to get it as close to good as we can, and make sure above everything else that it is safe. I'm just trying to think, are there any other tests we should do in terms of working out combinations? Is it worth talking about how you should actually
Yeah,
label
so
things
I
and to
always
do the
find
actual
the
test?
best thing to do is sort of melt your wax, add your fragrance at the percentage load that's right for the fragrance, but also that the wax is going to hold. So most UK waxes hold up to 12%, but there are some that hold 6 and 8%. So always sort of check how much the wax will hold rather, because otherwise, if you go over that amount, that fragrance is just going to leach out. So it's then wasted money on fragrance that isn't going to be absorbed or used. So that's another sort of money saving area there. But label them. So have an A4 piece of paper down or bigger, put your jars on top, pour on top, but in front of that candle, have written down exactly what wax is in there, what amount of fragrance, what wick, and light them all at the same time. So you're getting a like for like scenario, because sometimes if a room is colder, if a room is hotter, you may get a better result with one over the other that was burnt at a totally different kind of temperature, or a draft, for example. Things like that can cause a flame to be smokier. So if there wasn't a draft on the other day, you may think, oh, this is the better wick, when in actual fact it's not. There's an outside interference with it. So it's always worth mirror testing, and the best way to do that is to test at the same time in the same circumstance. Mm.
Yeah, and if you are trying different things or trying to work out what wick, I know if you're just starting out, the tendency is to try and work out the winning combination immediately, but actually you need to focus on one thing at a time. It's a bit like going back to school science, that you can only change
Variable, yeah.
one element, see variables.
Yeah.
So keep everything else as a control and don't change it, because then you'll work out each bit one by one. Otherwise,
and if there's a problem as well, if something's not working, you want to change it one thing at a time, because then you can pinpoint what that one problem is. I mean, I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10 it's going to be your wick. It's either your wick or your temperatures predominantly.
Yeah, but I remember us talking before, and I think when I was starting out, I thought, okay, well, I know what, I haven't changed my container, haven't changed my wax, haven't changed my wick, so I know those 3 are sound. The one thing I had changed each time was the fragrance oil, and I think I remember saying to you, like, why isn't it working for this one particular fragrance oil? I didn't even realise at that point when I first started out that actually the fragrance oil can change things. So you could be just stuck with that one that's not playing ball. And that can also throw everything off.
Just it sounds mad, but with fragrances, I mean, I can say it for our fragrances in particular, but our fragrances have a high natural element to them. So from one batch to another batch, the fragrance can actually be incredibly different, not necessarily in terms of the fragrance flow and the scent of it, ideally, but that can actually happen as well. But in terms of how it reacts with a wick, so you could have 4 batches of, let's just say, strawberry and vanilla that burn perfectly with a TCR 2412. But this 5th batch that's come in, the natural ingredient in it can be so slightly different that it actually needs the 2414 instead, because of how that's changed. The easiest way I can kind of word it, I guess, is if you buy strawberries out of season, they don't smell incredibly and they don't taste too sweet either. If you buy a strawberry in season, it's a totally different ball game. So that's going to also impact the fragrances that are made from them when there's such a high level of natural ingredients to the fragrance. So you may find that can cause changes.
Yeah, yeah. I think that brings you on to kind of another tip there that's sort of hidden there, is that you should not just consider testing at the beginning when you're first starting out. Like, testing reminds you of best practice. It gets you to hone your ingredient list, your ingredient combination. Perhaps you can actually, now you're more experienced down the line, reduce your costs by reducing your fragrance load. Perhaps there's different temperatures where you can actually get just as good a heat throw or cold throw from adjusting things slightly. And if the fragrances are shifting over time or shifting seasonally, at least then you've done the testing at those different points of the year. Because you will also, you'll be making your candles potentially not in the same environment. Like we
Mm-hmm.
had 40-degree heat last year. Europe's
Yeah.
having a nightmare at the moment, but you're not going to be making your candles
Mm-hmm.
for sending out orders potentially if you do this at home, and maybe as custom orders or ad hoc, like made to order. You're necessarily going to be doing
Yeah.
this in controlled environments anyway, so you kind of got to see how everything
And
performs at different points as
you
well,
bring
because
us there to a perfect point for
yeah.
Christmas testing, because obviously a lot of people are testing and making their candles now in the summer, where if you're leaving them on your kitchen side to cool, if you're making them from home, they're going to be cooling in a much higher temperature naturally of a room temperature because of the heat we're experiencing. So they're going to cool much slower, and therefore they're less likely to have sinkholes, air bubble holes partway down the candle, because it is a slow cool. So the wax isn't shrinking fastly. Whereas then when you come to make them at Christmas time, when they start selling, they're going to, because it's a much colder temperature in your kitchen in winter as it is to summer, they're going to cool with a much more speed. Therefore, the shrink is going to be much quicker and much more noticeable, in terms of you are going to have predominantly a sinkhole at the top, or a sink bubble, as we call it, partway down the candle. So, and air bubbles, if you've got a clear glass, you'll see the air bubbles potentially as well. So they're all things to definitely bear in mind when doing your testing in summer for a winter product.
Yeah. And when we've talked about marketing before and kind of getting set up as a small business, we've also mentioned things like packaging. So test what actually happens when your candles leave your house, or when your products leave your house. Because when they're thrown
DPD.
around by delivery services, and when they're stored in places, perhaps you have them stocked in like retail spaces that have really chilly stock rooms, or just left, in postal sorting, that kind of thing. You have to be prepared for the candles, if they're in clear glasses, shrink away from the edge, even if they've left your house or your place of business in perfect condition. So I think you test that process as well. I think that's not kind of a conventional test on paper, but I think it's useful to do.
Almost as well, a good selling tip is, if you've got soy wax, predominantly when cold temperatures hit soy wax, you're always going to get an element of frosting. It's just where soy wax is made from hydrogenated soybean oils. Once it gets cold, it's going to revert back to its natural state, and that causes like a frosting pattern on the top of a candle. Now that's unavoidable, no matter how you make your candle. No, if it gets cold enough, that's going to happen. It's a natural reaction. So a way of selling that to a customer, if they do complain, is it does not impact the candle, the fragrance, the scent throw, anything like that at all. And if anything, it just reiterates that your candle is a high, naturally made candle with ingredients in it. So it's almost like it's backing up your statement. If you're selling it as that, it just reconfirms your marketing.
Yeah, definitely. That's such a good point for people. Just thinking about other things that I've written down here. Can I read my notes? That is the question. Let's talk about safety. So something that I hadn't thought of was actually when it comes to pillar candles. I don't know if anyone who's watching makes pillar candles, but it's the stability of the base of a pillar candle. You want to make sure that can go on most sides. And you have to think about a customer here as well. Like, they're not going to be carefully putting something down necessarily, following everything by the book. Who knows what their sides are? So we've got to make sure in the testing that we've tried it, and we've also tilted it to like 10-degree angle, and checked that it's still stable and holding its own weight. So do check the stability of pillar candles there. The other thing I've written down was about botanicals and other elements in candles that I keep seeing everywhere, and I feel like starting a campaign to
absolutely. Unfortunately, I just think it's unavoidable, isn't it? There's so many people out there doing it, and you see it and you think, oh, I could make something like that and it will look lovely, and you don't think of the risks and the implications that come with having a flammable petal inside a candle right next to a flame.
Yeah, And I'm going to mention, I don't normally mention brands, but I'm actually going to talk about the White Company, because I think that will, people will know the candle I'm referencing when I say that. But so when we get to Christmas or even summer, I think their Seychelles candle has shells basically at the bottom of it or around the edges. And their fruit candles in winter also do. They have like oranges and things like that. The way to do that at home, you could put things in a glass within a glass. We've done before with gel wax and have the fruit suspended. When you look into this, there's a lot of companies that try and copy this, but it's not tunneling that this candle has an issue with. So when people have this one specifically from the White Company or other brands that do, you know, high end with the fruit around, the reason it looks like it's tunneling is because it's actually made with another ingredient. It's patented online, so you can look into it. And I've got no idea what the actual ingredient is that makes this shell, but it's basically a hard shell that doesn't burn and doesn't melt. So it's those botanicals are never going to come into contact, unless the item's faulty, with the flame and with the wax. So that's why it just burns on the inside, and people are like, oh, it's tunneled, but it's not. I don't know why I'm being mean about those people that say that. That sounds horrible. But my point is, you think that's beautiful and you sit on the side and you think, I can do that at home. And you just pop it in the wax around the edge. But it's not the same. There is like an invisible mesh that holds these two materials separate. That's my Christmas themed rant over. But I hope that's useful for people anyway, because they may not realise and try and just do these things at home. What other testing shall we talk about? So we've talked about the wicks being too big or too small and the flame height. Something else to think about is like the smoke tests and having a look at how you actually extinguish the candle as well. A lot of people say you shouldn't blow out your candle because that will blow wax everywhere and cause a lot of smoke. You can just dip them in the molten wax. I don't know what your preference is. I think I just forget. Everyone still blows out birthday candles.
I think I'm an odd one. I really don't like smoke. So for me, I get like, probably, don't know if I should be saying this, but like a non-flammable coaster sort of thing, and I just starve it of oxygen. So I just put something on the top, over the top, let it starve of oxygen, flame goes out, but it doesn't go out smoky because there's no oxygen to, like, you've completely cut it off of any oxygen, so there's no way that it can smoke. That's my preferred method. If I'm just
so like super snuffer kind of thing. Yeah. Can tell I'm in marketing, coming up with a slogan for everything. So other things in terms of safety, we briefly touched on it, but in terms of the jar, just making sure that it's actually safe. I also see a lot of people doing DIY candles with things like terracotta pots, which can actually absorb the wax. And then if you're doing something like I do for my small business, which is founded on upcycling, you want to be really mindful of how far down you burn your candle. So you shouldn't go any lower than 1 centimetre, because I've seen candles explode. TikTok is full of them. But if you just leave them unattended, sorry, I shouldn't be laughing. If you leave it unattended for too long and it goes right down to the bottom of the glass, that heat is huge on that. To be really scientific and just say huge, but they can crack and all sorts of stuff. That
the other thing you need to bear in mind as well with your container, especially if you're going to be selling them, is a container is only ever meant to be one use only. So if you start then filling it up and using it again, filling it up and using it again at home for home use and for testing, it's at your discretion. Obviously, if something goes wrong, it's down to you. But when you sell them, if that's multiple use glass, it's more likely going to explode, and then you're liable, and you just got to hope you have your insurance sorted out for your business, and you can prove that you haven't obviously used that container multiple times and what have you. It's definitely, you see a lot of the time people making candles in wine glasses, for instance. Wine glasses are not heat toughened. they're not designed to be used with heat exposed to them to that level. They will shatter, maybe not sometimes, but there will be that one occasion where it can go if you've got too big a flame, or like you said, if it burns too far down and that thin glass, it's just going to go. So they're all things to bear in mind. Make sure when you're picking glass containers especially that you're getting ones that are heat toughened and suitable for candles.
Yeah, I saw something on daytime TV actually a while ago, and in some of the forums, candle forums, it really kicked off. But it was candles in teacups, you know, and using it for that purpose. So upcycling the thing that it's, you know, for a different purpose, but it was dangerous, and they didn't really caveat that with the safety element there. And the only other thing I just want to go back to mentions about botanicals and other things. So we've mentioned things before about like food imitation and things like that. These different rules, the reason you might see these things coming up is because you maybe follow accounts that are global, or they are based in the US or based in Europe. There are different rules around fragrances, around candles in these countries. America, as far as I'm concerned, allows like food imitation candles. So they look really cool, but children can look to eat them because they look like sweets, especially like wax melts as well. So I will say that might be the counter argument, say in comments being like, oh, but I've seen people doing this and they're a massive company. That's potentially the reason. It's
because they can. Exactly that. And of course, with anything like your fragrance oils, especially if you have got children at home, keep them out of reach. It would not be the first time we've had calls from hospitals where children have drunk the fragrances and we have to send off the SDS documents to the hospital. So obviously they know exactly what the child has then potentially ingested. So it's also very good practice to download all the documents for the fragrance and keep them somewhere, so you've got them to hand in case one of your customers, your end user, comes to you as opposed to coming to us. So it's always definitely worthwhile keeping those documents somewhere safe and saved somewhere.
And just while we're on SDSs, I will just say about CLPs that once you've done all your testing, the CLP covers you for an amount that is even potentially higher than you've actually used inside your candles. So the standard CLP templates are around 10%.
And
5% as well, something like that on the Cosy Owl website. So even if you've got a candle that is 6% fragrance load, 8%, the 10% one will cover you for that.
So it's worth noting, not the 5%. It has to be the one above or equal to the amount you're using, not one below.
Yeah, and do refresh your knowledge if you've been going a little while, or if you're trying a new fragrance oil, because looking at those SDSs, you may just assume that you can use your fragrance oil that you love in candles to make a gift set and do it in soap and do it in diffusers, but these things need to be checked because you can't necessarily do that with certain fragrances. Fragrance oils only allow you to use them at certain percentages.
So for that, it's not the SDS you want to be checking, it's the IFRA. You want to be checking the IFRA document.
And if you have any questions about documents, you are looking at your queen of documents.
Nope.
You're always getting that job, I swear, Stacey. You get a poor job there. I think we've covered pretty much everything I can think of in terms of like troubleshooting, doing your initial testing if you're trying something new and starting out, refreshing that, and then just making sure you're doing your safety tests as well in terms of flame height, container, smoke, all of those things. But if there's any other questions, you can
absolutely send us an email. Send us an email, give us a phone call, anything like that. We're there to help. So yeah, use us.
Because honestly, they've seen everything. Like pretty much, there'll be someone else sitting on this live or watching it back that has tested the same fragrance oil that you're trying and
given us
and it will save you money as well in the long run.
Definitely.
Brilliant, great tips. I'm just like feeling like I want to go make candles now because it's like a bit cold. It's pretending to be
bless you. I get to go put my daughter to bed.
Yes, well, I'll let you do that. Thank you for
No worries.
watching.
Take care. Thank you for joining. Bye.
Thanks, Stacey.